And hopefully everyone feels comfortable with that. I'd like to share it with everyone who signed up today. And if it is just the six of us, I'm sure we can have a great conversation, because Faye and Elizabeth and I have already found that this has been a fruitful book to talk about. But before I hand things over to Elizabeth and Faye, I just was really inspired by during these times that we've been in the past couple of years, where we've all been sort of so disconnected from one another. I was so grateful that Brené Brown, as an expert, was really addressing how do we actually cultivate connection. And just the subtitle of the book, Mapping Meaningful Connection in the Language of the Human Experience, seems like such an inspiring thing to explore more deeply with other intelligent women like yourselves, and to really get in touch with what is it that we're all seeking and that we're missing, frankly, in these times that we've been in, and how can we cultivate it as we move forward with this new knowledge of experience of disconnection that we've been having. And so I am grateful to Brené Brown for presenting this to the world, frankly, at this time, so that as we move into whatever's next, we can do so more consciously. And so I am just excited to have a conversation with all of you about it. So thank you so much. And Elizabeth, do you want to say a few words and then pass it along to Faye? And then maybe everyone could introduce themselves. Okay, great.
I would love that, to hear a little bit about everyone as a way to connect. I'm Elizabeth Cheroutes. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I've been in the community for about 30 years. And I've worked in almost every work setting possible as a clinical social worker, but I've been in private practice for about 18 years now. And this book absolutely blew my socks off, reading how Brené has managed to put language to very complex emotions, and and really put those emotions in a contextual framework. So, I will be using it from this day forward in my personal life and in my professional life. And I just really appreciated how accessible this book is and how thorough it is. And I think the piece that resonated with me the most is how important connection and belonging are in the world. So that's me in a nutshell.
Faye, do you want to say a few words?
Sure. I'm Faye Campbell, and I've been in the community for about 25, 30 years. I have only been in private practice the entire time. I come to this book believing and really savoring the fact that this is a credible, researched 126 pages in this back of this book is a bibliography and notes. This is not a social media flip, let's pop book. This is grounded, it's researched, and it's many, many years of tested information on how our language affects everything about us, all our communication. So I'm thrilled with Brené Brown's book. I've not read any of her others, so I didn't have another side of her. I've listened to podcasts and YouTube that put her on the stage, but this is, I'm thrilled, and I have already used it in my practice. So I'm a marriage family therapist by license and been in practice a while. Okay.
Laurel, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'd be happy to. I may be the newbie in this group. I don't know. Hi, everybody. I'm Laurel Sandbell. I am not a clinical therapist. I'm clinically trained as a dietitian, although the last many years of my career I've been doing more work in the academic space, and right now get to work with nutrition incentive programs that are trying to get fruits and vegetables into the hands of our neighbors that need it the most. So that's a little bit about my background. I came to Brené, about me, but in terms of Brené, I was first introduced to Brené many years ago because I'm a huge TED Talk fan, and found her naturally through that, since I think she has one of the top 10 most popular TED Talks. And so have just, followed her loosely until fairly recently that I, space in my life started to open up to do more introspective work, maybe. I don't know if that's, I don't want to claim anything that isn't correct, but just a series of events that led to my being able to attend a workshop that was facilitated on video by Brené Brown. It was in person facilitated by an oncology therapist out of Cheyenne who had gotten a Wyoming Breast Cancer Foundation grant to bring us together for a weekend to discuss daring greatly. And I mention all that because I'm a huge fan of all the above and would love to share any of that with anybody that's interested in learning more later offline. But anything else I'm supposed to say about myself? I guess
great.
I guess both of you guys led with how long you've been in the community, and I don't know if that matters or not, but I've been coming out here since 1979, and finally figured out how to be out here full time about 4 years ago. So that's me. Sorry if that was too long.
I think that's good.
Kelly, do you want to say a couple words?
Sure. My name's Kelly Webb, and I am part of this year's cohort with Womentum. I'm a mentee. I am currently a full-time student at the University of Wyoming, getting my BS in psychology with a minor in sociology. So yeah, I'm kind of looking to pivot career-wise. And yeah, I've always been a big fan of Brené's work. I think, like others, was introduced to her TED Talk, and that's where I started. And I think I've read all of her books. I didn't make it completely through this. I'm taking 19 credits, so sometimes my extra reading like falls to the side. But yeah, I've gotten through the first quarter of it, and I'm finding it really helpful and intriguing and really important to recognize how important language is in connection to emotions, recognizing them and feeling them for what they are within you. So, yeah.
Anne?
Thanks. Hi, team. I'm Anne Magnan. I live in Lander and help lead the Lander Womentum group, which we've been doing. We're now in our 5th cohort. But I'm on this email list, and I love all things Brené Brown. So thanks for the opportunity to pop in. This book, I think, is, well, I have a lot of friends who really just like talking about their feelings, but somehow this book makes it accessible. And so I sent a lot of copies out for holiday gifts. I went on a road trip with a couple of friends who really don't like to be asked how they feel about anything. And we just kept saying, well, what do you think that word means? And so I like that you can dive into it and get some clarity on definitions, because I'm like what somebody who said earlier, our language limits our ability to understand. And without the right words to communicate how we're feeling, like the difference between envy and jealousy, yeah, it muddies what we mean, and it just widens the gap in communication. So I love it. So psyched to chat with you all about it. Thank you.
And I'm delighted that you joined in, and I'm always hopeful that Lander women will make appearances on our Zoom opportunities, because I wish we connected more readily. And actually, I have been inspired to do sort of some book discussions, very much by things that I know you guys do with your cohort. So for those of you who don't know, that Lander has started a Womentum program. Obviously, it isn't recent now; it's been 4 years, but it's been a great collaboration between our two communities, and we just wish that there were more and more opportunities for us to connect, hopefully in person one of these days too. So, okay, Mickey, are you there? Are you able to join in, or are you on silence?
Sorry, I just got home and I was trying to take care of the dog. I can't get there we go. Yeah. Okay. So, okay, I get the prize for being in the warmest spot today, I think. Thank you. I'm Mickey Babcock, and I, first of all, am a disciple of Faye Campbell. And when you said that Faye was part of this, I will follow her anywhere. I live in Jackson most of the time, except when I'm out here in Santa Barbara. And I sort of like what I've been hearing you guys say, that Brené, like many of us as women, can be sort of taken as lightweights at times, a social media queen, but she's not. And she does have deep and meaningful things to say. And I agree with Faye in the sense that this book is very, very well researched. And I think what I particularly appreciated about it is that it gave not only the language for individuals, but it also built the case for communities. And that's what I'm particularly interested in, is making sure that communities are thriving, and particularly women. So, and I'm delighted that there is a Lander cohort. I didn't realize that. My charitable foundation, the Equipoise Fund, had the opportunity to help incubate Womentum from the very beginning. And it is exceptionally delightful to me to see how far you all have come along, and thank you.
Oh yeah, thanks so much, Mickey and Sam. Lander only exists because Jackson and your team led the way. So thanks for leading the way. We're happy to follow in your footsteps.
Excellent. Well, before you all logged in, Elizabeth and Faye and I were just discussing sort of how do we see this conversation going, and ultimately, I hope I'm not taking words from you, Elizabeth, but she said, I just want to hear what everyone's take home is about this, and so I volunteered to lead the way in terms of my own personal take home, which I think for me, the biggest take home, while the resource of vocabulary that I feel like this book is, and I could read over and over again and have conversations at dinner with my children about these different emotions. The piece that I personally felt most valuable to my own circumstances is how the whole concept of a close enemy, and how often we think we're trying to connect when actually we're creating disconnection through a lack of listening and being present, and it is, in our desire to help and fix. And I, for one, didn't realize that as clearly as she illustrated this in the book. And I am so grateful for that. I feel like I've been to therapists and family therapists over the years, and I think that message was trying to be presented to me, and yet it didn't click in the same way as the way that she explained it. And so that for me is something that I have a whole new level of awareness and a desire to take a pause and really, hopefully, be more thoughtful around when I'm or maybe be more aware of when I'm uncomfortable with other people's uncomfortable emotions. I guess that's probably the way I would put it. So that's what I feel like was a gem that I wasn't anticipating in this book. So.
How many people have gotten through this whole book? Yeah, and you have? No, not quite.
Bits and parts, Faye. We talked
Okay.
about various parts. I'm like, what
Yeah.
is the definition of this word?
Yes, yes. Why don't you speak from whatever you've read and share what your takeaway is just from what you've read? Not the whole book, but any part of it, because it's pretty potent wherever she is. Mickey, can you speak to that?
Hang on, Faye, let me.
Sure.
You know, I would say I got more out of the latter part. I'm trying to open, I've dog-eared the pages that I had meaning. No, skip me and go ahead and I'll be right
Okay.
back. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else want to jump in here?
If I may, I'd like to jump in. I mean, so much resonated in this book with me, but her part on boundaries is really impactful because we often so believe that boundaries are something we do externally. You know, we set a boundary with someone else. And she really highlights the importance of, you know, boundaries are within. And we can't have good boundaries unless we know who we are. You know, her quote is, "The boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously." It's just awesome. It's really, really good stuff. Because I think that word boundary is so confusing to a lot of people. And as a mental health professional, you know, this is right up my alley, and it's, you know, it's adding just so much more richness to the way I talk to my clients about boundaries. So that's something for me that really, really resonated.
I can comment. I think, and this is going to be kind of a general comment because I'm where I'm at in the book, but what I'm pulling away from it is really thinking about the different definitions of words that I thought were kind of the same. And it's, you know, I think one of you gave envy and jealousy as an example, and that's such a great one to like understand, think about the difference between the two, and then it, like in that process of considering the different emotions, it helps me figure out like, okay, what thing is it really, and helps me figure out like really the true source of what I'm feeling. It's just another way to kind of like get into the emotion from the side and figure out like, okay, what is this that I'm feeling? I think it's really common, you know, to kind of group our emotions together in like these maybe 5 or 6 different emotions, like angry, scared, whatever. And often, you know, if you are just looking at your emotions and you have kind of a limited language for the word, for limited language for the different emotions, then maybe everything kind of feels like anger when it's not. It might be fear, it might be jealousy, it might be frustration, it might be all those things. But if you have really limited emotional words, you're not really going to figure out what it is that you're feeling, right? And I think that's the kind of one of the big points of her work in this book. And she was on a different podcast recently, an interview with Glennon Doyle. She does a We Can Do Hard Things podcast. And in that interview, they were kind of talking about making up new words for their family. And Glennon was talking about her kids, and her kids saying like they were scared about something. And they had to, through conversations, figured out it wasn't really scared, it was excited, but a little scared by the excitement. So I forget what the word is, but they created like a combination of scared and excited. And what the purpose of that was, one, for the kids to really recognize, like, what are you feeling? Are you scared? Should you be moving towards something or away from something? Are you excited about it? Does it feel like it's in the middle? And it helps them kind of understand, like, do I move forward towards it or away from it, whatever the thing is. And it also helps the parents understand what kind of support's needed for their kids. Like, are they excited with them? Or if their kids are really feeling scared about a thing, that's a totally different kind of support and conversation. So by kind of, I don't know, coming up with this new definition, it really helps the person understand what they're feeling. It helps other people understand what they're feeling, helps figure out like what that conversation is and the support. So I think that's the biggest thing that I'm pulling away from this book so far.
I think that's getting the backstory, putting it in perspective there. Nikki, is your hand up?
Yeah, I'm fine. I found it. Thank you, Faye. Sorry,
Okay.
I'm a little not grounded today, but getting there. So page 254 was sort of what began the aha for me, which was a grounded theory on cultivating meaningful connection.
Yeah.
And her point about taking the combination of ground confidence, the courage to walk alongside others, and stewardship as being the important part of creating meaningful connection.
Yep.
To me, that's what we need, not only in our world, but particularly in our country and within our communities right now. And of course, I think, the book is prelude to all of that in a community work. But, the opportunity to be able to move forward with those 3 points in mind, I think, are critical. We lost a dear community member over the weekend, last week, Leland Christensen.
Oh, yeah.
And it has broken my heart because he embodied all of that. And as you read more and more and more in a bipartisan, nonpartisan way, the richness of his life and the number of people he connected and the change that he affected, he embodied those 3 points and he created meaningful connection. So I think in a larger way than an individual perspective, which of course is important. You can't get there if you're not prepared. To me, this is where the meaning of the book came in. I lived in Memphis for about 40 years and moved there right after Dr. King was assassinated. And on page 263, she talks about his speech, the sanitation workers, and how he defined power as the ability to achieve purpose and affect change. And if we're not for that, then I don't know what we are as community members.
Very powerful.
We can do this.
Well, I'm going to speak from part of, I was very impressed with her presentation on being right which is near the end of the book. That so often in couples work and in community work and in all relationship work, people struggle so often to be right at the detriment of leading the relationship, at the detriment of working away from what they may be presenting as what they're wanting. But she has the quote that says, "I'm here to get it right, not to be right." And I think that's very powerful. Getting it right meaning listening, meaning being curious about you, being open to what you're saying, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, not having to do with the way it's my right, but to work towards the relationship. And again, that's, Nikki, as you're talking about, it's community, it's relationship, it's connection, it's belonging. I love her use of hardwired. All of us are hardwired to belong and connect. And if we really get behind all these feelings, even the ugly ones, people are really trying to connect. Yeah, even the ugly ones. The whole work on hate in here is frightening because it's so predominant in our society now. But behind it, it's the need to connect again. It's the need to belong. So those were some of the things I got out of this. How many of you knew my husband? Mickey did. As I went through this part on humility, who that man was spoke, because that man had humility. He had these characteristics. It's pretty nice.
He absolutely did, Faye.
I want to speak to the way this book is constructed. If you look at it, and I think it's such a great reference book that when you're feeling any of these things, you can just turn to that page and get some help.
I'd like to reiterate what you're saying there, Faye. I thought that it was really cool that they were clustered in categories rather than like an alphabetical thing, because truthfully, I feel like it's an easier way to wait, how am I feeling? And look up sort of the basket of certain types of feelings that are maybe overlapping and confusing to a certain degree, but actually she does such a good job of sifting them out, but within that little basket. I'm really appreciative of that in particular, and feel as though it's especially as a mother of teenagers who, needless to say, we're all really emotional, but teenagers seem to be that way, on a super scale, at least at my house. And to be able to sort of bring it into like, I'm not sure which one of these actually resonates with you, but here's a basket of these types of feelings. Which one might be the best fit? Just to be able to sort of almost have a conversation about those differences and learn, with curiosity, right? As she says, instead of a sense of like, oh, you're feeling this right now. This is sort of a like, I'm getting that you're feeling in this area. Which one is this? So feels like it's a great learning opportunity to, cultivate self-awareness for all of us, and then also that connection opportunity. in that regard, but especially by the way it was created, to sort of create a little bit of a framework around it.
Have you listened to her talk about how she came up with that yet? Have you heard her? And that it wasn't her idea. Her idea was to have it alphabetical.
Oh.
And her students said, and I think one of her students is actually her oldest daughter, said, no, the way we have made sense of this is you need to group them by theme. And she said she rewrote the book based on their feedback.
Oh my gosh. And was that, I'm kind of remembering that now. Was that in this book, explained in the book?
It might be explained in the book. I've also heard a bunch of interviews with Brené.
Yes.
In the book, but I like that, right? It gets at this humility piece. It gets at how you're curious. It gets at getting it right and not being right. Yes. And she did not have to tell us that this was her process. But I like that she did. For me, it models a intellectual humility that I think is missing in a lot of our conversations about all manner of things, not just feelings.
I would agree. I think it was organized in a very intuitive way. And because that's the way I think, I jumped right into it, and it was easy for me. No, I shouldn't say easy to read. It's a deep read, but it was easier for me to embrace the material because it was organized. I think it was because it was organized that way.
Yeah. I was absolutely enthralled with her personal application of what she was writing about. And I'm thinking about, I have a picture of her daughter when they were paddling together. I don't know if you remember this. And she turned around, I think her daughter, one of the daughters was about 8, and she had quit paddling. And she turned around and saw her daughter with the sun on her face and her paddle across. And she kept looking at her, and she was so content and so serene and looked so wonderful. And then she got worried because she wasn't moving and asked her, honey, are you okay? And what's going on? And she said, oh, Mom, I'm just getting a memory image picture. So when I'm unhappy, I can use it. But those kinds of examples throughout this book really lock it in for people.
Another great example of that was how she and her husband, in talking to their children about friends, and how we all have a flame, and that friends are people who help feed the flame, as opposed to those who might try to blow it out. That's an example that I absolutely think is essential. If we could all approach our relationships that way all the time, it would be a game changer.
I think that was in the section on getting where we can identify near enemies. Was that one of those? When the friends seem like they're friends, but they're really trying to blow out your flame. And they're hard to identify. Her grounding culture, her cultivating meaningful connections has a category for those near enemies, so you can see how to identify them when you're in their life. That's another very practical work that she offers to people, because it's hard to identify a near enemy. I think the far enemy is easier because it's opposite, but it's the ones that seem close that you don't know they're there until they bite you. So she not only teaches it, but she gives a model on how to use it.
I believe one of the most practical applications of this book is in being curious about the stories and really asking people what their story is, which helps you connect, which helps you feel empathy naturally if you just ask. And to me, it's simple, but we often are so caught up in what we are going to say that we miss it. We miss a lot when we don't ask and just continue to ask and be curious. I think that's a very practical application, I believe, that we can all do to make our community more connected.
Or our marriages. So often, even in those close, intimate relationships, people don't listen and ask of their own mate or their own partner or their own business partner. Somebody that's very close, somebody will start and the other person then nabs it and goes off and talks about themselves. So listening to the story and curious, Elizabeth, as you're pointing out, is key. Yeah.
Elizabeth, back to your point, I was struck by her admitting that she, while previously thought we could label other people's feelings, now firmly stands in the part of that you can never know, that how I show up angry, disappointed, sad, fearful might not be how you show up, and that I shouldn't label yours. I'm curious in your work and in Faye's work, how you see that applying in terms of people trying to understand each other's feelings.
Well, something I ask of all of my clients when we first join in on the Zoom call, because that's all I'm doing, is what is it like to be you right now? And it forces thought, and you can see people's minds going in many different directions, but it instead of them saying, oh, it's all right, or I had a really shitty week, it's the thought, like, what is it like to be me? And as a person, as a woman and a practitioner, it's that, to me, I'm so curious, and everyone answers it differently. But that gives them the power to define their emotions. So I don't have to say, you look frightened or you look frustrated.
I think as a clinician, I don't label. I want the person to tell me how they feel, and then to listen more, and many times to delve into it. Tell me more about it. How did this come about? What's the story behind it? Working with couples, it's really teaching the couples not to invalidate the other person's feeling. To stop and really listen. Are you saying that your partner shouldn't feel that way? That the invalidation of it, and trying to teach them then how to go into seeing that somebody can feel differently under the same circumstance. And both feelings are valid. They're meaningful, and they need to be understood by the other person in the way of acceptance that, that's your feeling under this circumstance, and I can grow and learn from it. I hadn't thought of it that way. It didn't affect me that way. And I see it affects you that way. So that's how I work with it.
Sam and Kelly and Anne, I'd like to ask you, in your work within your cohort, with your partner, with your mentor or mentee, is this the kind of experience that you're having with your individual mentor or mentee, and is this what your cohort is experiencing as well?
Will you elaborate a little bit more in terms of when you say this type of experience, what you mean?
Well, going back to say, for instance, what Faye and Elizabeth were talking about, listening to people, and I think Elizabeth, your question, what is it? Who are you? Not who are you today? It's
What is it like to be you?
What is it like to you?
you today. I, that's really powerful, and I wonder if that's what you're experiencing within the cohorts.
I
Kelly,
can
do you
start.
want to? Oh, go ahead. Thanks, Anne.
Mickey, in our work, our second session is all focused on asking good questions and listening hard. That's part of the way we build our program, because we find that so often are we excited to give advice, that we sometimes start giving advice without actually realizing what the person needs and if they want advice. We have a whole ritual in our cohort of community announcements and requests, and that's like I need a new vacuum, I need a house cleaner, right, those are the advice seeking. But we spend a lot of time, we do it in our second session, October session, then we build on how do you ask good questions, right? They're 10 words or less, they don't include the word why, they start with what and how. We ask people to remember, like, what's at the heart of your concern, right? Trying to ask a lot more questions. And then we're on tomorrow is our next session. It's all about vulnerability. And when people have been vulnerable, when they've seen vulnerability, what they think about the vulnerability myths. So it's a lot of deep dives into the people as humans, and trying and letting the human relationships be how they are resources for each other outside the sessions.
Kelly, do you want to speak on your experience with your
Sure.
mentor? Okay.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, having 9 months to be partnered with someone and we get into kind of deep conversations, and like, that's they're purposeful conversations. We're getting to know each other and everything too, but like, how can this be a mutual relationship? And as a mentee, like, I've come into it with some vague goals, and like, I just trying to help figure it out, but it's so useful to me to have a person to kind of pull that apart a little bit. And there's lots of questions, and they're back and forth. And I think, she's really trying to listen to me when she asks me, like, what am I looking for? What am I needing? Like, and they get more detailed and deeper than that, of course, but she's listening to me. And then the questions I ask back, it actually be super, I like the idea of like just a training on like how to frame a question, like, because I know questions are like a really valuable part of the conversation, but sometimes I'm like, what is it I'm trying to get to? What is the thing that I want to ask? So that just stood out to me. But yeah, I mean, I think listening to each other, validating each other is definitely happening and a huge part of it. And I think you have this whole group of people who may or may not know each other very well. So we're all learning about each other and looking to each other as resources and developing those relationships. But then it's also very cool to just like learning about people's experience, where they're at, what they're doing with their lives, how they got there, how they feel about it. I don't know, you can't guess from the outside what people are feeling. And so it's really, the whole process feels like an invitation to have those conversations. I don't know, I'm kind of rambling. I'm not sure if I'm quite answering the question, but yeah. I mean, this is me and my mentor totally having some really great deep conversations. And I think we both probably bring a little bit of insecurity to it, and getting to know each other and diving deeper each time, like, okay, what are we really trying to get to? What is the next step? How can we serve each other? It's a great process. I think it's happening.
Mickey, I'll just share our next cohort workshop, and then we're going to be offering it to the public in March. Carrie Kirkpatrick is offering an Enneagram introduction to the Enneagram. And for any of you who are familiar with the Enneagram, what is especially neat about it is that it is only the individual who can truly define what number they are. And it's sort of the most foundational component to the conversation and the introduction to it, because everybody sort of wants to typecast all of their family members and friends and say, oh, you're an 8 and you're a 6 and you're a 2 and all of these other things. But actually, it really is about the individual claiming which thing resonates for them. And that really is the only thing that is essential. Not to sort of take over Carrie's work and her amazing workshop that is coming up, but I feel like that is so synonymous with the theme of what's in this book. Is we can all peg everybody based on our perception, but we don't actually get the connection until we learn it directly from the person who's experiencing it. So it would be really nice if everybody, you know, if universally we were all tuned into that all the time. So yeah. Laurel, I've been noticing you're a little quiet over there. Do you have any thoughts or anything you'd like to share? We only have a few minutes before we wind down. So not to put you on the spot, but I'm curious to hear anything.
Yeah, just because I've not gotten very far in the book. I've been drinking this in and taking a few notes actually, and just grateful to be listening. I think, you know, because I'm so early in the book, that concept of differentiation of emotions, language, you know, giving accurate language is really the thing that's resonated the most thus far. But and I apologize, I'm going to need to scoot off. I've got another meeting that I'm leading at 1, but I'd love to stay on the mailing list for maybe that Enneagram workshop or whatever else is coming up. So
absolutely, yes, I'll be sure. I'm delighted that you must have found this through the listserv or the business listserv or something, and so I'm over the moon that you've joined us, and hopefully it's just whet your appetite for all things Womentum. So we're delighted you're here. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you.
Laurel, let me just say one thing before you get off, because you hit the nail right on the head, even though you've only read a slight bit of this book, is accurate language is what we can communicate to be best understood and to understand one another. And you've got it right there.
You're very gracious, Faye. Thank you very much. It's beautiful to meet each of you. I hope we meet again. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks. Well, we just have a few more minutes. Faye or Elizabeth, is there anything that you'd like to say before we conclude?
I think I wish this could be just the start of a lot of conversations in how to make our community maybe more emotionally literate. And because it's an accessible book, I mean, it's a thick book. It's meaty, but I think it's also really taken in parts. I think it could be translated to so many different places. Businesses, organizations, different age groups, different cultural groups. I mean, I really feel like this is a gift that we have, and I'd love to be a part of figuring out how to use it more.
I think that's great, Elizabeth. I agree. Very practical, very helpful. Depth in imbitable pieces where people can understand it.
I would love to see it be part of like a high school curriculum or something. I feel like, I mean, there's so many valuable things that could be happening a little earlier, but it's hard when there's like, we all as adults are still figuring out some of these things too. But gosh, like what it would do for a group of teenagers to kind of to read this book, or just be presented with the material in a way that they can understand themselves a little better and have a common language. I think that, right, the common language is really important to closing the gap, and more connection, understanding ourselves a little better and understanding the people around us. Yeah. Teenagers, I would love to get it in their hands somehow.
Maybe it'll happen.
Something that we didn't talk about, which I think is just a quick thing to mention, is that, we've talked about sort of teenagers, and we've talked about social media and the sort of connection / disconnection that cultivates, especially for that younger age group, but that it was actually such a phenomenal use of social media that Brené Brown actually gleaned so much of her research information from support groups through social media to actually establish all the research data that she had. And wouldn't it be amazing if there were a way to sort of cultivate coolness, frankly, in the self-awareness, as opposed to the image, outward expression thing that seems to be so prevalent on social media nowadays. And I am appreciative that she was able to use it as a resource in the same way that we are with the Zoom conversation, right? Like here we all are in different locations having a really deep, meaningful conversation. And it is cultivating connection in a time when maybe it's a little less easy for people who don't know one another to get together. And so, somehow paying attention to that seems important.
I agree, Sam. I think there is a great benefit when the web and the media resources are used appropriately. There's a great opportunity. Kelly, I love your idea of the high school students, and my 2 cents to throw in would be, we are quickly approaching a new election cycle, and in the state of Wyoming there is a pretty strong effort, bipartisan effort, to get more women elected in office across the state and into communities. I think an opportunity for inserting this kind of material into election training would be a really useful tool.
Excellent.
That's an amazing idea.
Yeah. I need to get off too. I think maybe everybody does.
I have a 1:00 meeting.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful.
We will talk again about this.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. Take care. Have a nice afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye.